You are live on the South Florida Tech Talk. I'm Joe Russo, the president and CEO of the South Florida Tech Association. Really excited and proud to bring you one of our first Tech Talks as South Florida Tech. We just rebranded our organization from Palm Beach Tech to South Florida Tech, expand our geographic scope over the entire region. So we're going to be doing a lot of these talks now, throughout the region once we come back and start in person again. So not just in Palm Beach, but also Broward Dade. So we're really hitting some important ground today. We're going to be talking about e-commerce a little bit. Obviously, with everything going on, that is an important, albeit necessary area of technology to be thinking about and talking about, as it becomes more difficult to really kind of reach your customers and reach your consumers without engaging them directly online. And with us today to talk about that, we have one of our Palm Beach Tech members, ApparelMagic, Brandon Ginsberg. Their CEO is going to be telling us a little bit about e-commerce integrations and Shopify. So with no further ado, would love to welcome him. Tell us a little bit about the company and, of course, our talk today. So Brandon, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. And also quick congratulations on the monumental achievement of expanding to South Florida Tech. It's a very exciting time for everybody here.
Monumental is a big word. I know a lot of our board members are happy. My mom sent me a nice text message, so there's that. But yeah, there's a lot of work to do on that. With great power comes great responsibility. So we can't just change our name. We got a lot of work to do to, really own up to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Obviously, you touched on something important, that a lot of brands are not able to reach their consumers as they were previously. So it's a pretty timely topic, and it's something that we specialize in. So I'm excited to be a part of it. Let me share my screen. Hope you don't mind the dog running around in the background. All right, so you should be able to see my slides there now. Yeah, so as Joe mentioned, it's a pretty crucial time for brands in terms of making some important decisions and potentially shifting their business model slightly to be more centered and focused around e-commerce. A lot of the brands that we work with at ApparelMagic have transitioned, and thankfully a lot of them had actually already prioritized and focused on e-commerce operations. And just a little bit of background on ApparelMagic. We're an ERP system specifically designed for fashion companies. From the ground up, it's built with apparel in mind. There are a lot of screens and features developed for that specifically. And we integrate with Shopify as one of our primary targets. And we're an endpoint for orders, for example. So let me jump right in. I want to actually take a moment to discuss a concept of omni-channel management. Which has been a term that's kind of floated around a lot these days in terms of managing e-commerce operations. And really what it boils down to is that it's a multi-channel approach, right? So a lot of brands and organizations have already made the shift to selling on multiple sales channels. A lot of them already might have Shopify stores or web stores. They might also be selling with brick and mortar. They might be doing big box retail through EDI. So a lot of brands are already familiar with that, with having a stack of software that has to, potentially interact. But what becomes crucial is having sort of a cohesive customer experience where you're communicating with the same core product data, the same images, the same descriptions and information, and you're integrating all of the different, components of your organization. Whether it's that brick and mortar store, the e-commerce operation, and managing a central, inventory, all from one place is going to become really, really crucial for companies as they encounter challenges with the changing times today. So a couple of key distinctions between typical multi-channel sales and omni-channel. Multi-channel is obviously going to have a lot of things running in parallel, right? So you're going to have to manage inventory and product data for a lot of different endpoints. You're going to have to make sure that you're uploading everything to the right place in terms of all your product images, descriptions, setting the right price points. So a lot of things are going to become kind of tough to do actually as you expand onto more channels. A lot of brands are selling on social media platforms now. They're trying to reach their consumers, where they are, with Instagram shopping and things like that. And obviously, web stores like Shopify are usually one of their primary sources of revenue. So with an omni-channel approach, you're going to avoid a lot of redundant data entry. You're going to have automatic synchronization of some really important things. Primarily, your inventory is going to be one of the most important things that you want to make sure is in sync with all those different places. And also for accounting and reporting purposes, you want to make sure that you have one central access point for managing all that information. And you don't want to have to be pulling reports and data from different spreadsheets or having to go into each different channel and making sure that you pull the information from the right places. So since Shopify is obviously the big elephant in the room in terms of e-commerce right now, they've had a tremendous increase in users and brands that have been using Shopify since the pandemic started. It's definitely a good idea to focus on what a typical Shopify integration would look like and how to make it the most successful when it comes to implementing it alongside some of your other sales channels that might already exist. So for a lot of apparel companies, at least that we interact with, and a lot of brands for a lot of different types of goods, you're going to have internal codes that you use to refer to your items and your SKUs, and you're going to have external codes and descriptions that you might want to interface to your clients. You're not always going to want those internal codes to be what you interact with on Shopify, for example. You want to make sure that when you're integrating Shopify, you want to make sure that you have the ability to leverage your internal codes, so that your internal users are able to leverage those on reports and for sales reports and things like that. But externally, you want to make sure that you have all the descriptions and titles the way that you'd expect an end user to read them, not necessarily with the internal codes that you have set up. Another key component, obviously, when it comes down to an e-commerce operation and your Shopify store, you want to make sure that you have things configured for SEO, and you want to make sure that that doesn't interfere in any way with your internal mapping and your internal reporting. All the descriptions and everything should be optimized for SEO, and that shouldn't in any way interfere with your internal usage for SKUs and reporting. And a couple other key components when you're looking at integrating your product and your customer data. Obviously you might have different price points that you run at different times for sales. A lot of brands are running sales right now to try to boost, revenue for everything going on right now. So you want to make sure that you have a very easy way to manage the different price points that you offer a certain item with. And you also might have to, go back and look at a history for a style or for an item and look at, what's the best selling items for a particular date range. And you want to make sure that you're able to look back for customer service purposes and see, maybe a certain customer ordered a lot of a certain style. You want to make sure you have a centralized place to manage all of that history and all of that data. So in terms of when you look at integrating Shopify, you want to make sure that all that data is flowing, with the appropriate mechanism. Another really key component to integrating your Shopify store is making sure that you have really, really tight control over inventory. Something that we encounter at ApparelMagic quite a bit actually is oftentimes, one of our brands will want to make a certain, allocation of stock reserved for their wholesale operation, their wholesale business. And a smaller portion of that would be allocated towards their retail and their Shopify web store. Now things might be shifted a little bit given, obviously everything going on. But it's important that you have a system in place that allows you to control that aspect of your inventory and make sure that you actually can leverage, what we call a virtual warehouse, basically, where you're able to segregate inventory into a certain virtual allocation and make sure that it's available and it won't be interfered, with by one of the web stores that you're connected with. And a couple other key components when you're looking at integrating your inventory control. You want to make sure that you have minimum inventory thresholds in place and triggers and alerts for low inventory. So when things are running a little bit low in terms of your stock position, you're alerted really, really quickly. And you also want to make sure that you have mechanisms in place to quickly repurchase goods if you need to. And then, we'll get into this a little bit later. But certain forecasting tools to help you, leverage all this inventory data that you might be pulling in from different sales channels. And then another key component for integrating your Shopify store would be high performance order processing. A lot of other integrations that I've seen have failed primarily because of the performance of order processing. They might be, for a couple of different reasons, but one of the biggest ones is because of delays, actually. You might run a flash sale, or you might have some kind of Black Friday offering, for example, that your stock's running out really, really quickly for a particular item. You want to make sure that the integration that you're using has some key pieces of technology that we prioritize in terms of our ApparelMagic integration. That would be webhooks, for example. What that does, actually, it's a little bit different than what a typical API integration would look like, where you're just making a request to a service. You're maybe polling for data every once in a while. As you can tell, obviously that's only going to pull in the data as frequently as it makes the request. So it's not going to be able to immediately react to important changes like, a sellout or something like that. But with webhooks, on the other hand, you're going to be able to instantly download order information, and your inventory is going to be updated automatically instantly, without having to wait for any kind of mechanism that's polling, Shopify system every once in a while to see what's going on. So with webhooks, you're able to power some pretty high profile, brands. We've had a lot of success with, brands that have on Shopify. Obviously, they handle it very well too, with flash sales, for example, or like a password protected site that goes live at a certain time. You want to make sure that when you're integrating a site like that, you have webhooks as one of the core technologies to kind of leverage, those capabilities and making sure that you don't have any inventory issues. Then finally, one of the other key components for the integration here is going to be fulfillment. As your sales channels expand, you're going to obviously have a much more complex fulfillment situation than you were when you were just selling brick and mortar, for example, or when you were just selling on Shopify alone. You might want to be able to support partial fulfillments of orders. And you want to make sure that when you integrate a solution with Shopify, it's going to automatically sync back some crucial information so that Shopify can then dispatch emails and information to your end users, such as tracking information and the shipping methods. Now, whenever you're integrating Shopify with any other systems, you want to make sure that all the things that I just mentioned are obviously in place, but you also want to make sure that you have a lot of control over how the integration will behave. There's a couple of key configuration tools that we give to our users, for example, such as how to interface a list of products with the end result in Shopify, making sure, like I mentioned, for SEO purposes and the images that you want to show up, you want to make sure that there's a lot of control for the company to make sure that their products are being displayed in the right way, in the way that they expect it to be. And you also want to make sure that the integration itself is not very complex. You want to make sure that it doesn't take too long to get set up, and it's as turnkey as possible. So the end result of having a good integration in place, it's pretty incredible. You're going to have centralized accounting. You're not going to have to pull reports from all these different systems. You're not going to have to, for your year-end closing, have to run a P&L from different systems or generate anything via spreadsheet on its own. You're going to have easy production planning. You're going to be able to take all the sales from all the different sales channels that you're involved with, Shopify, brick and mortar, and actually do production planning and forecasting based on that data, all from one centralized location, instead of having to go and maybe pull everything into one spreadsheet manually and then adjusting everything to go and make those predictions. So it's really important, and what's really nice about having it all in one place at the end of the day, when it's integrated, is that you can manage that process all from one management point. So that's something that ApparelMagic does really well, and something that we take a lot of pride in, is being able to leverage a lot of these tools and technologies that I mentioned, webhooks and a lot of the customization options for the integration, to make sure that brands have exactly what they need to produce really, really good looking Shopify stores, really high performant Shopify stores that don't crumble under pressure or have issues with inventory. And that also, give a lot of control to key components like inventory management, and then later back in ApparelMagic doing your production planning and forecasting. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, so for those who are on Facebook and LinkedIn, if you want to dump in questions into the chat, I'll read them off to Brandon and we can go from there. But Brandon, you talked a lot about logistical side of things there too a little bit. What do a lot of your customers use, or what is maybe some good examples of how people are managing their inventories right now, either fulfillment centers, like internal, like what are some of like the more I mean, we talked a lot about software, like what's the hardware side of all of this look?
Yeah, so a lot of it is going to depend on what they were doing before. Sometimes they might have, just stock in their stores that they're dealing with. But a lot of the companies that we interact with actually use professional 3PL services, like Bergen Logistics, for example, or something like that. So they might have relationships with companies like that. And we, on the ApparelMagic side, obviously have good relationships with them too. And there's integrations with those solutions. So you want to make sure, obviously, when you are talking about the hardware side of things, that you're working with, a partner or a warehouse logistics partner that's capable and expecting, everything that's going on right now, and making sure that their solutions integrated on the software side too. Because if you're working with a 3PL or you're working with a warehouse solution that's not, obviously, a lot of them are kind of archaic. Actually, a lot of them are still using not the most modern technology. So it's important to assess, what kind of technology are they using, and will it integrate and play well with my Shopify store, with whatever backend, and in our case with ApparelMagic, making sure that there's a tight relationship and integration there too for success.
Yeah, and one of the things too, we just had a question pop in here, but shout out to Shipmonk, which is one of our members in Fort Lauderdale, is a fulfillment center, does a lot of the stuff with us as an organization, but also really great for local startups. But James asked, can you integrate Shopify to an MVC project?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of companies now are obviously coming out with MVCs that that need to integrate with Shopify, and that definitely are. Shopify is getting more and more users every day, so I definitely wouldn't be surprised with that.
Awesome, and also a shout out to I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but one of our longtime friends of Palm Beach Tech is this gentleman named Matt Ferrer, who has a company called Versatire. They're going to be actually on a documentary on Discovery Channel that is produced by Shopify. Coming up here in this month. Yeah. And it was pretty interesting walking into the office one day and seeing the COO of Shopify in my office, just hanging out. But it is pretty interesting to kind of hear the story about how all of these entrepreneurs have been able to build and scale with Shopify and the platform. So
yeah, and we have to give them a lot of credit too, because I think that they've done a pretty good job of assisting, obviously, brands getting things up and running where they might have had trouble in the past. Obviously, everyone's had to shift to e-commerce more recently. So, good on them for being able to accommodate everyone getting on Shopify. And obviously, there's a lot of different moving pieces, and we've had to do our share of pretty quick moving too, to obviously keep up with everyone transitioning.
Awesome. Well, it looks like those are the questions. I'll throw another one out to you just from me. I mean, understanding maybe where are we at with the fashion and the apparel industry right now during COVID. Obviously, nobody needs to look overly fancy right now, but where are we looking as far as people buying fashion related things online?
Yeah, it's really interesting. What's funny, actually, a lot of people have transitioned to making and therefore buying masks, like way more than you'd expect. I mean, obviously, it's something that people are going to be using more and more every day. And, I've heard from a lot of different people I've spoken with, you shouldn't be wearing the same mask every day. And I think a lot of brands that formerly might have only, produced shirts or something like that. As long as their supply chain can accommodate it, a lot of people are starting to transition to masks. And what I'm seeing more is obviously the omni-channel solution and making sure that you have a connection, a deep connection between all your different sales channels and making sure the end customer experience is great. It's going to be crucial for meeting people online where they're at, because everyone for the most part is still, either working remotely, working from home, or some sort of mix. And a lot of people are doing their shopping primarily online. So having a really tight connection and making sure that there's a centralized management point for your product data, and your sales and service, it's going to be crucial. And I'm seeing a lot of people really finally get that into high gear and make sure it's performing really well.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, thank you very much again. ApparelMagic, based here in South Florida, in the West Palm area. If you know anybody who's looking for any e-commerce related jobs, check them out. If you know anybody who is looking to kind of build out their technology from a fashion perspective, also check them out, and just connect with Brandon. Great guy, awesome member. Thank you so much for being engaged and involved, and thank you so much for spending the time to educate us all here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Have a good one, guys.